So I am going to go over a few things about Bloom's taxonomy just to make some things a little clearer than they are, and to introduce a simplified framework about the different levels of cognition. Um, Now, the main question when we consider Bloom's taxonomy is really, how well do you want your students to know the things that you're teaching? Whether it's facts, ideas, concepts, principles, or whatever, skills. Um, when you think of having students just be able to recite something from memory, that's not the same thing as understanding it. Doesn't mean they can use it in a real world situation. Doesn't mean that they will know when to use it. Doesn't mean that they'll be able to combine it with other ideas that they have, or figure out whether it's a good thing or not. Right? So when we think about the things we're going to teach our students, we have to consider this idea of cognitive depth. And different cognitive depths require different teaching and different types of assessments. So Bloom came up with 6 different types of thinking. Lowest level is recall. Highest level kind of bounces back and forth these days between evaluation and synthesis or creation. When we think of recall, we're going to call this level 1 cognition, or the most basic form of thinking. And it really is just an input output, only one way into that bit of knowledge. So if I, know what to say in a given situation based on something I've learned or memorized, I can say it when I get that input, but I can't really get at that knowledge any other way. It's like if I have my knowledge bit and another knowledge bit, we could call this a term and a definition, right? Even just a label and an item. When you think about when you're teaching a kid what a cat is, they see the cat in the house and you say it's a cat, and they say cat, right? They don't really know what a cat is. Can't probably differentiate it from a dog or a mouse at this point, right? And there'll be a lot of mislabeling and a lot of kind of fuzzy fixing as you go along. So when we think about this memorization or this recall, we're thinking of it as a very simple knowledge network. Stimulus, response, stimulus, response. Doesn't necessarily even go the other way from response to stimulus, right? It's like if I ask you what letter comes after C in the alphabet, you probably go A, B, C, D, right? Rather than having some kind of holistic understanding of how the alphabet is arranged. If I ask you the letter that comes before uh, C, you would probably go A, B, C. You wouldn't go, oh, C, B, A, oh, it's B. You can only get at it this one way. There's nothing deeper. It's just kind of this memorized thing. Um, when kids learn to recite songs or the Pledge of Allegiance or anything like that, they don't really understand what a lot of those words mean, but they can say them. If you ask them to describe them, you probably will get a lot of weird looks and different answers. So this is the most basic level. The earmarks are, right, I have no evidence of whether or not this student has integrated this knowledge with anything else that they understand. They probably can't paraphrase it or put in their own words. They probably can't connect it to different ideas. So if I am testing at a recall level, I'm just testing for things that they may have memorized but don't really understand. If I want to go a level up to level 2 cognition, this is going to be comprised of comprehension and application. And if we look at this figure here, what we have here are these 2 knowledge bits, right, that we started with. However, this first knowledge bit is also connected to some other things, and the second knowledge bit is connected to some other things. And these other things are connected to each other and other things still. And so I have this richer network where I have a much more integrated sense of what this thing means. And so if I'm thinking of the cat analogy again, right, I see the thing or I call it a cat. The child also understands that it's, furry, has 4 legs, has a tail, is not a dog, not a mouse, and it's connected to all these other different things, right? Climbs trees, has retractable claws, things that make a cat a cat. If you're thinking of content areas, say something like social studies, where I'm talking about, a simple fact like, Cortez and the conquistadors conquered the Aztecs. Um, you can memorize that statement, but Comprehending it really has to do with integrating with different bits of knowledge, knowing what conquering means rather than having a peaceful negotiation or a merger, understanding why, knowing who Cortez was and what he was about, knowing who the Aztecs were and what they were about and why the conflict arose in the first place and all this other stuff, right? Then you have comprehension, or you're getting closer to it. And I just want to make a special note that the difference between this and this can be very slim. All I need to do is add one of these extra circles, and I'm a little bit farther away from recall and a little bit closer to comprehension. We make up these categories to describe the way that the world is. But it's a continuum. It's not an all or nothing thing. So when we talk about on the first day we meet about the differences between assessing at a recall level and assessing at a comprehension level, there are different degrees of this. And you will also have to not just decide what level, but how far into that level you really want to be. Now, when you do this, when you assess at this level, right? If I have a goal of comprehension, that means I have to teach it. So they connect it actively to other bits of knowledge that they have, other existing networks. When I test it, I have to add something new. I can't give them just what was in the text or what we said in class or the handouts that I gave them or a movie that they watched. I have to ask them either in a different way, using different terms, or I have to give them new ideas. And this kind of goes into the other level 2 cognition. And again, this is my simplified categories. There are 3 levels rather than 6. Application, meaning that I have my existing knowledge network, right? But when I get a new situation and I'm told to use these ideas or redescribe these concepts, I can do it. If you think in math, right, I teach a strategy about how to solve, say, using some just kind of basic division skills, right? And I teach students how to use a word problem, or I teach them a strategy of making a model or using like a predict and test method, right? When I give them a new situation, I expect them, a new word problem, I expect them to be able to use this equation to figure out the solution, right? Just like if I give them a concept, say, about what a conquest is, again, going with social studies, or I give them a technique in art about how to use a particular, painting technique, say, about how to use watercolors, or how to do a wash in the background of a painting, right? I expect them to be able to use that with different types of paper, different mediums, with different goals and different styles. If I'm thinking about business and stuff, and I'm thinking about, I want them to be able to use some kind of strategy to either fill out a report or make a document or calculate interest, they should be able to do that whether I'm working on a bank loan or home loan, some kind of compound interest or whatever, right? So I teach them the skill, I throw them into a new situation, I expect them to be able to do it. So that's what application is. Now, when we get up to level 3, or what I'm going to call level 3, we're dealing with analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Analysis is all about seeing the deeper structure of things. And when we talk about the deep structure, it's like songs all have a deep structure. Movies have a deep structure. Stories have a deep structure. Word problems in math have a deep structure. Paintings of a certain genre or type have a deep structure. There's something in the essence that makes it what it is. And being able to analyze something is the ability to see what that deep structure is, to see how the parts are related, right? When you think of a song, right, the words and the melodies and the key, it can be different, but the structure usually is the same. Little introduction, verse 1, verse 2, chorus, verse 3, chorus, key change, chorus again, something like that. Very standard format. Movies follow the same kind of script, even though the people and the places and the events are different. So analysis has always been able to look at any type of government to see how it's organized, right? Any type of painting to see how the pieces and the colors and the theme and the mood are put together. being able to see how those different parts are related. And when you teach people how to analyze things, you are teaching them about that deep structure, being able to ignore the surface of the problem, or the surface structure, and focus on, well, what is this really all about? When we think of synthesis, what's now called creation oftentimes, what we're trying to do here is I have my deep structure of part A, and I have another deep structure of something else, and I need to combine those into something new. When you think of artists who take, right, different songs and kind of mash them up and combine them together, that's synthesis. It requires understanding how one song can fit with the other, figuring out what these touch points actually are, rather than just doing a random thing, right? Because anybody can combine things, but it doesn't mean you really can synthesize it. Um, if you think of all like the cooking shows, like MasterChef or MasterChef Junior or Chopped or anything like that, to be successful, you have to understand how different tastes and foods and textures and all that stuff fit together. And you need to be able to combine it into something new when you are kind of thrown into these novel situations. But it's not just about making something new, because anybody can do that. It's about making something new that still is high quality, or still is successful, or still is meaningful. Now, evaluation in terms of cognition is really all about understanding a particular set of criteria and then applying it and making judgments about the deep structure of something else. So if you think of your dancing shows, like Dancing with the Stars was just over, right? Or some of the singing shows like The Voice, or So You Think You Can Dance used to be a big one too, another dancing show. Um, or even the cooking shows, right? The judges all understand what a good dance or a good song or a good lyric, a good performance, a good whatever is. They understand with the deep structure and all the different parts and how they need to fit together and how it's supposed to look. They need to be able to understand all those criteria and then apply them to each part of the deep structure and the relationship between those parts to make a sound judgment about the quality of something. So if you are teaching your students how to evaluate art, say, you have to give them a framework about what makes it good versus what makes it bad, right? Because it's nice to say that all art is meaningful in some way, but there's a reason that some art is considered really good and some art is not, right? There is successful execution. There's skills that are required. Same thing for different strategies for solving math problems. Same things for different governments or government programs. When you look at and you evaluate during this upcoming presidential election who you want to vote for, you should be thinking about what are all the things that make a president a good president, a leader a good leader. And you should be able to make a judgment based on everything, not just these hot button emotional issues, even though that's kind of what everyone does. And so I think we often fail at this because we don't understand enough about what it means to be a good leader. We don't understand all the issues because there are a lot, and it's kind of a full-time job to keep up with that stuff. So what we will be doing going forward is I want you to take a stab at coming up with an overall goal that is either analysis, focusing on the deep structure of something, a synthesis thing where they have to have two different deep structures and combine them into something meaningful and be successful, or an evaluation task where you have to teach them this evaluative framework and then have them apply it to the deep structure of something. Okay, so whether you're teaching math, science, social studies, business, art, language arts, anything, right? I want you to come up with a unit that has as its overall goal, the overall point of everything, one of these levels of cognition. Okay. Um, we'll talk more about this on Wednesday, but I am looking forward to seeing what you come up with.